Okay. Clerk of the Legislature advises that it's 6 o'clock and time to start the Health and Human Services Committee meeting. We have one item on the agenda, but before we get to that, is there anyone who wishes to be heard? If not, we'll get right to the resolution, which is amending the operating budget due to an increase in funding of the Childhood Lead Poisoning and Prevention Grant funding. The amounts are $5,234. The increases go to specific line items as outlined. Are there any questions? Thank you.
We need sponsors.
Yeah, that's what he's doing.
Oh, sorry.
Sponsor in a second. Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we'll conclude the meeting at what committee at what time?
6:01.
6:01. Thank you.
Now you have to wait for a minute.
It's just my nature to be like
Efficient.
never really serious.
Bad habit.
Is this my pen? That I left here?
Oh, everyone's been passing it.
Yeah, that's
I
not
think it
true.
was mine, actually.
Oh, it's yours?
I'm not in favor of that. Well,
Someone else left it.
Not coming.
No, I'm gonna call. Actually, Mark is coming over to see me for something else tomorrow. I don't know.
You can have mine.
No, I mean, I don't think it's broke. I just think there's something with one of the settings.
I mean,
that just.
we've
I went
seen
upstairs,
plenty
we
of
started
them.
the router, he came in, he got connected, Martin got connected, down, and typed like a half hour.
In other words, Cheryl screwed it up.
But yeah, no, I'll have him look at it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I would not.
The Wiz likes to come over, right, Roy?
That's
Wiz is the Wiz.
Bring the cash. We're just waiting for 6:05. Then we'll wait for 6:10.
Sorry,
Yeah, very good shape.
He's watching each other.
That's not on.
That's right. Watching Red Floyd. You paid for it.
paid for it, yeah.
I have a good one.
He's like, I'm nice.
Is that right? Yeah, no, this one's pet projects. You wondering why it's just, where's ours?
We have one, it's mine. Yeah.
They get filed in the appropriate location.
Oh, that's,
Oh, yeah.
He's in there. Time yet, Cheryl?
Oh, 1 minute.
no, I do wait, right?
Oh, my dear.
Okay.
Okay. Call to order the Economic Development Planning Committee. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to have to discuss? If not, we have two resolutions before us. First resolution is
accepting a grant application for the Montgomery County Bike Trail Restoration Project / Canal Corporation, Economic Development and Planning. Your sponsor? Mr. Diamond? Legislator.
I'll second.
Thank you, legislator number 1. The second resolution is a resolution amending the budget, New York State DOT, STOA.
Are you going to vote?
Oh, we have to have a vote, yes, thank you.
I
All
think
those in
there's a
favor?
cheat sheet there.
Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody
I can't vote.
abstain or?
You can be do it.
Okay. We'll go on to the next one.
Deal me in, I read these.
What, pardon me?
Deal me in. I've already read these.
Resolution amending the 2016 operating budget, New York State DOT, STOA 215-16 cleanup, economic and development planning. We have a sponsor.
Sponsorship.
Legislator Diamond,
No, second.
Legislator DeChessie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain? No? Thank you. There's nothing else? Yes? Oh, vote. All those in favor?
Aye. Oh, yes, he is on. No, just,
He's going to do, yes.
oh, under, okay, good.
Oh, we can do it, yeah.
That's right. Other now. Right?
Yes. Now we're on the other. Helga, would you like to,
Yeah. I have a couple handouts. I brought it up for the whole legislature, so.
Okay, you want me to take them?
Yeah, there's 3 packets. I gotta turn different ways. That's 1, 2, 3. I know it looks like a lot, but
it's not homework, is it?
no. Not unless you want it.
Sure.
So, should I?
Yeah, you can start.
All right, okay. So, is it right to stand?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I quickly just want, I have a few things that I want to go over, but one of the things that I want to apologize for first is I recognize from the conversation the last week that I've been having meetings with Matt and Carl and the executive, and I guess I just imagined by osmosis that it would get out to everybody, so I've been remiss, Sean Jordan from EnVed. I've been remiss and realized that I really need to come as Sean to the legislature to update you on some of these things that are going on. And I realize that now. I apologize. I have been meeting with Sean, with Sean, Matt, Carl over the last 6 months, almost every 6 weeks, I would say, and regularly emailing about some of these issues. But I do realize that you're kind of in the dark. The first packet I would bring your attention to has a piece on top that says our history with West Hill School. And quickly, I'm just going to go through these things just so you know what they are. This is basically all stuff I've given to the executive over the last 6 months, and I want to bring it up to speed. Our history with the West Hill School just goes through the things that we've done with the project since the county transferred it to the village and transferred it to us. We have reached out, or had reached out with to the executive and are working to get that money for the back taxes for the property by the end of the month, which is, I think, $12,700. And I know I've talked to some of you individually about that, but we are planning to get that in ASAP and have discussed that with Sean. So that's the first thing. The next 3 items are 3 different proposals regarding tax foreclosed properties that are coming up in the next cycle. And what we did is, in one of them, Palatine Bridge approached us, as I know they approached the county, and they said, hey, we have this historic Wagner house, we want to take it down, but we want to save as much of it as we can. So what we did is we gave them a proposal to salvage the building, demolish it, and return to them a clean site, saving whatever we could for a future museum or whatever they want to do with it. We would do it at cost, and we put in the quote that any reduction from salvage would also equal a reduction in price for them, for that project. And we are insured for $2 million. We have done the asbestos and things like that, so we are certified and can provide any of that paperwork. 23 Center Street, you'll see for this project and for 51 Mohawk Street in Fort Plain, we have an engineering report. These are two buildings that are on our kind of footprint in Fort Plain. 23 Center has been condemned, went through the flood, was never cleaned out. The basement is collapsing. It's in very bad shape. We'd like to either take it down and use it for parking, or if it's doable, rehab it. But what we did is put in just a brief proposal along with the engineering report where you can look through that and see the bowing walls in the basement and the other issues that are happening with that property. 51 Mohawk Street, you might be familiar with, is the old Masonic Temple in Fort Plain. In last August, the roof blew off the building. It's about 30,000 square feet. We went up as the owner walked away from the building. He didn't have insurance. We went up and we tarped the roof. We invested, $1,000 of our own money to tarp it twice because in the winter the winds took the tarps off. They shredded them. My concern with this building is there are some serious issues structurally that are in the structural engineer's report that we go into, and I think putting it into the foreclosure auction would potentially end up with another situation where somebody strips the place, turns around and sells it. We put in a proposal to re-roof the building at an expense of roughly $30,000 and a commitment to get it back on the tax rolls as a rental property with some potential renters. So that's the MVC piece, and I just wanted to put out there, as I said, these are all things that we have given to the executive, but I wanted the committee to be aware of, and Cheryl, if you would pass them on to the rest of them, and I'll be happy to talk about any of that over the phone. But this is a good segue into the land bank piece. Basically what the MVC is doing, and these projects, one of which we recently acquired last fall, another one that's not mentioned here, but was a foreclosure that we had received as a donation from Wells Fargo. We've invested so far about $50,000 in the property. It is still on the tax rolls. We plan to keep it on the tax rolls and operate it or sell it as a rental apartment building. And that is really what MVC is doing, is really a small-scale land bank. Taking properties that are white elephants, that are properties no one has any interest in, doesn't want to invest in, and turning them back around so that they can be a productive part of the tax base and the financial wherewithal of the county. So with that, I would like to go to the next packet, which starts out on top. You'll see this Distressed Communities Index on the packet. And in that packet, you'll see a map. Some of you may have seen this already. I've given this out to some of you. I emailed it to some of you. But if you haven't seen it, you will quickly find Montgomery County on this map because it is rated as the highest, most distressed area in the whole northeast of the U.S. Going all the way to Maine, there's not another area in that same level of distress. Now, as with any study, there can be differences of opinion, different interpretations. But if you read the statistics, it's based on a number of factors, not just poverty, also graduation rates, employment possibilities, things like that. And a lot of these, obviously, we're having some trouble. So that segues into the last packet, which is about the land bank. This is something that we first met with the county on in May of 2014. And have continued to work through. We got a resolution in November of 2014. Many of you were here for that and will remember that. But we have been working on getting the other 6 counties and 3 cities that are foreclosing governmental units in the region to sign on to this idea. And what it is to bring this regional economic development tool to rehab and bring these properties back from either foreclosure, condemnation, and things like that. I invite Sean up at this point, but what you'll see in that packet is a couple of things. There's two big concerns that we faced in the land bank effort. And again, I've been giving Matt and Carl regular updates on this, but I realize that some of this has not gotten its way to you. But what we did is this table shows you the chart of the population of all the counties in the Mohawk Valley Red Sea, the Regional Economic Development District. It also puts it in scale with the other existing land banks in the state. And the two concerns we've gotten most often is, why can't my county just do its own land bank and do it, go it alone? And the other is, Oneida County is going to take everything. So what I would try to convey to you with this chart is that together as a region, we would have the third largest land bank in the state, and would have a compelling reason to go to the state, who has currently $17 million in funds for the next round, that is only available to the new round of land banks, which we would be a part of. And that's to be divvied up between 5 new land banks. If we ran it alone, let's say with Amsterdam, our total population is around 50,000 people. Now, if you look at this chart, that would put us above Newburgh, which is the least funded and one of the smallest land banks. And I think that would set us up for another situation where we are falling behind, like in this chart. So that's our concern, and why we feel the regional approach, where we have weighted votes, or not weighted votes, but a Senate type vote, where each FGU gets its own vote, meaning Oneida County has 1 vote, Montgomery has 1 vote, and it gives us the ability to compete and to make sure that projects don't all go to the western part of the Red Sea. The second attachment in that is a letter from the LISC, which is administering the current round of grant funding for the Attorney General's office. This letter mentions May 10th as the deadline. They extended that deadline today to the 16th. But this deadline is arbitrary. They just came out with this. We've been working with them for 6 months, and it's really been just, they came down last Tuesday and said, it's going to be this day. Sean was able to get them to move it back to the 16th. We have the application largely done. I provided it to Megan and Matt to look over. I did email it over. I emailed it twice last week. I can talk to you after.
So when you sent it?
I got it last night at 9 o'clock from Ryan,
Okay.
but there was never any attachments to
I
it.
blame Ryan. But I did send it last week, and I sent it to Matt, CCU, and I'm sorry. But I could provide it again today if needed. And the last piece is the New York Land Banking Association Guide to Land Banking, which I think if any of you want to read up more, it's a good primer on that. But where we're at now is we have the application, largely completed. It's a draft. The ESD asked for a draft application, New York State Empire State Development, because what they want is, once you submit your application, they want the FGUs to get together and hash out the details of the intergovernmental resolution and the other pieces of the application. The problem is we need to get a signatory on that. The discussion we had originally had in November of 2014 was that Montgomery County would be ideally the lead, but at this point I don't know if we can call for request some sort of
resolution. Go ahead.
I don't know what the next step is, but the problem is, the point we're at is, if we don't meet this deadline, we're going to lose access to that 12.7 million in funding. And based on the prior rounds of funding, Syracuse, for example, which is about the same size as our region, has gotten 3.5 million in funds. The state attorney general's office has said to us in writing that they expect that we would get at least 1.2 million to 2 million for our region. And the thought of losing that because we can't get the application in time, I understand that this seems like a last-minute effort. We're not trying to, get in under the line. I don't want the county to rush into something. Again, I just feel remiss myself for not involving the legislature more, when we've been working with Matt and Carl to move this forward. So,
Couple questions.
yeah, sure.
As you know, I'm pretty familiar with land banks,
Absolutely.
having been involved with the Amsterdam-Schenectady one for a couple of years. The resolution that we passed doesn't say that we'd be lead agency. It just says that we encourage and support the formation of it.
And let me clarify, I don't mean lead agency as in leading the land. We simply, ESD said, one of the FGUs
Right, you need
needs
an
to
FGU.
decide to just sign the application to certify.
Yeah. I mean, my questions or my concerns are a couple things. One question is, in this paper you gave us, it says May 26th as the deadline.
May 26th is the deadline for our proposal for the grant money. But the ESD application has to be in, it says on that one the 10th, they moved it back to the 16th, which is Monday.
And last that we talked, you were talking to Oneida County to see if they would, yesterday, sign as the lead.
They had to move they gave us the wrong date for the meeting. It was supposed to be yesterday, it's actually tomorrow. So we are also going to that too. But I still feel strongly that it makes a much better, I think that if Montgomery County is the first signatory, the first county to resolve to form the land bank, one of the ones that we work with first to kind of get this moving, I think it sends a signal to other counties that Oneida County is not going to be, kind of the big elephant in the room.
Now, when on this sheet you have Montgomery County having 50,219 people, I guess a concern of mine would be, since Amsterdam's already involved in a land bank, you take 18,600 people off of that and make that a smaller number. And I guess my question also would be, how would you propose to handle the relationship between this 6-unit entity and, say, the city of Amsterdam that's already in a land bank?
Well, the way we've discussed it with ESD, the door is open if Amsterdam should decide to switch over to the Montgomery County land bank, or the Mohawk Valley land bank. So that option is there, that they can decide based on their agreement with Schenectady, whatever that is. So that door is open. On the population side, what we're looking at and what the state is interested in the funding is figure out projects and which counties have shovel-ready projects that are ready to go. And I think that Montgomery County, between the things that we have in the western part of the county, I think there are plenty of projects that we can give them. And I think that if we set up an equitable breakdown, I think it's important to say that an equal amount, because obviously, let's say we split $2 million 6 ways. Obviously, it's not going to do a huge amount of projects, but I think it's important that we go with an equitable model based on dollars and not based on population.
I'll leave it open to other members.
Yeah, I do have a question. And this will be regarding the city of Amsterdam and Montgomery County, because both entities have right of foreclosure.
Yeah.
Well, what if there was a project in the city of Amsterdam that was not being handled through the land bank that they belong to? Would that still be eligible under the through a county application, or?
I would have to look into it, but I mean, I would think if it's county, if it's within the county, especially if, let's say, it's a county foreclosure, as opposed to a city foreclosure or something like that, I would think that there is a possibility, but, I will ask and, get back to you just to confirm it.
To appreciate your presentation also, and I kind of get it that you're under the gun here on some of these things, and I certainly would support this.
I guess I just,
I've been able to tour some of the properties that the Mohawk Valley Collective has worked on, and I think I've been frustrated the last 2.5 years about the lack of power that we have to combat blight. And I know it's a topic of discussion in the city of Amsterdam, and every year when tax foreclosures come around, we say, oh, it's going to work this, or we think maybe it'll work this time. We keep on doing the same thing over and over again. But ultimately, these properties, the Wagner House is a perfect example. It's gone through the process now for the second time, and at this point is just shot. That these properties do not, once they start that decline with the tax foreclosure process, we never see them turn around. Now, I know, I believe Duke and Terry, you were both, I attended a presentation out in Buffalo on the Benlick land bank. I believe there were two of us there, I can't remember at this point, but to see what Benlick, the Buffalo Erie Niagara land bank has done with some of their properties is just phenomenal. And it's really getting to the heart of that, of how do we take these properties and before they get to a point of no return, like the Wagner House and like so many others, how do we get them back to productive use and on the tax roll? Instead of just saying, let's get them on the tax roll, don't care who they go to, what use they go to, but let's just get them on the tax roll where theoretically and most likely 10 years from now, they're going to be a vacant parcel. And I think at a very small scale, the Mohawk Valley Collective has been doing that with certain properties in the western portion of the county. And I think looking at the numbers as far as population go, we'd have a much better shot of combating blight if we were to be able to participate in a land bank like this. And correct me if I'm wrong, under the Land Bank Act, there's only a certain number of land banks that can form in New York State, correct?
Yeah, there's 3 slots left.
There's 3 slots left.
Yeah.
So, I think it's an extremely powerful land use tool that specifically can combat blight and encourage, especially upstate communities, to revitalize. I think my opinion is that it's an extremely powerful tool, and I think it would serve Montgomery County extremely well to be able to have that opportunity to participate in them.
If I could add one other component to it. As of a couple weeks ago, I ran the numbers. In 4.5 years, the Mohawk Valley Collective has fundraised $260,000. That's in Fort Plain and Kennesaw. Now, knowing the communities, knowing the blight, the distress in those communities, there's not a lot of wealthy people. But we've been able to get as far as we have on 7 projects and, with basically on a shoestring. Most of that goes into labor. We're hiring people without skills, people that are on social services. We're training them to do carpentry, teaching them how to do demolition safely, with workers' comp, with disability, all these things. We're insuring these buildings. And I think we're a good neighbor. I think we're doing a good thing for the communities. And I think scaling this up, I think, could have a lot of benefits, not just with blight, but just the unemployment situation. Because people that aren't able to get jobs and things like that.
I don't have any issues with land bank. And land banks can be a very powerful tool. And it's just not for preservation. Part of it has to be a component of demolition to help the cities with properties that are beyond repairs. I think the question that's come before us in the last week is not necessarily whether we like the land bank or we support the land bank. It's the mechanics of becoming the governmental foreclosing unit and signing that document, and whether or not we needed a special meeting to do that and whether the timing was going to work. I don't know that anything has changed in the past with that. I might be wrong. But that pretty much is the crux of the matter, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Ryan, you had something?
I guess, and I've looked through the application, the pre-application, or I think is what they referred to it as, there's a signature spot for an elected or an official of one of the organizations. Now, am I wrong? I guess my read of it is that nowhere does it say that it's the, lead organization. The application's really not set up for, even like the Capital District one where it's multiple organizations. It's set up for like a Newburgh style one group. So
ESD said just one FGU needs to decide to be the one deciding.
But by deciding, I guess my question is by deciding to sign that pre-application, one, are there any, as far as becoming a lead, or, ultimately it's going to be all participants will have an equal standing. But in getting it going, by signing that pre-application, is there anything binding that says Montgomery County's got to lead the way, hold the meetings, take minutes, whatever? Two, is there any financial obligation?
No.
And three, there's no, the actual formation of the land bank, the
501c3.
yes, that and the intergovernmental agreement, those all come after the
Later.
correct?
Yeah, those are all, we just have to submit a draft of each.
So, and it may be a bad comparison or a simplified comparison, but I guess I look at, after reading through this application, I don't understand how it's any different than, let's say, like a CFA application or a grant application. Even where a match could be required, when our Economic Development Department works on grant applications, we don't approve those. They get signed by either the director of the department or the executive, but frankly, I'm not too sure. But then if those are awarded, like this evening with one we were awarded last year for the Canalway Trail, when that comes back to signing a contract or putting funding in place or whatever it may be, that's at the point that the legislature weighs in. So I guess long story short, my look at this application, I don't see that it actually binds anything. It says, hey, we're interested, please consider us, in the way that a grant application would. But I guess I don't believe that the legislature has to weigh in at this time. Now, I could be oversimplifying, but
Yeah, I
that's my
defer to
take.
Megan, of course, but that was also our read, is that it's, it's simply, it says on there, certifying that, you're, not, you're putting your name down as, it's as to be valid.
And it's a completeness, completeness not line. This application is complete and accurate to my knowledge.
I'd like to ask the county attorney if she could address the
Well, it's, again, I got this at 9 o'clock last night, so really hard to weigh in and give much of a legal opinion on it. However, from my understanding of this is we are, if we submit this application, applying to be the land bank, right? We're applying to the state to get
It's
the
a
land
separate,
bank.
there would be a 501c3 form that, would be the land bank.
And the application says if it's approved by ESD, then we have to immediately file articles of incorporation with the state within 45 days. And we have to start the process.
That would be MVET, which would be the lead, as far. Unfortunately, MVET is, the state has said that they could be the formers of the land bank, but they are not an FGU, and only an FGU can sign the application. They haven't, so it's kind of this conundrum.
But
I could add to that just to try to make it a little simpler, I guess, and to touch on your point as well. Essentially, MVEDD as a not-for-profit is not an eligible applicant, so to speak, on this particular application. We can house the land bank, we can sort of be the lead in the land bank process, but in every application, certain entities are allowed to apply and certain entities aren't. In this case, the eligible applicants for this particular application is one of the already participating foreclosing governmental units in the land bank process. So essentially, Empire State Development has asked us to acquire the signature from one of the already participating FGUs in this process on this initial application to them that is not binding, does not add any sort of additional information or any additional ties that we've already talked about with support from the county for the land bank. There's no money attached to it. It's basically just saying we need one of the entities that are supporting the land bank to sign the application for us. And then beyond that point, we will, as MVDD, sort of take the lead in setting up, the board and file the articles of incorporation and getting things going. But essentially what this is when you work on a CFA application or if you work on a Main Street grant application and you're either an employee or a department head, you either get the department head to sign an application or you get the chief elected official to sign the application. But this is not at the stage where you would then receive back from the state the sort of contract that enter into an agreement, if we're talking grants, that then I guess would require official board action and would come before a vote. Because I myself was an elected town supervisor and before that worked in the economic development department for the same county, so the process is somewhat familiar. So this is sort of where we're at. It's basically one of the participating FGUs is asked by the Empire State Development to sign our application so that we may, as MVDD, have access to the funding that we've already sort of received a verbal commitment for. And without that, we would not be able to receive said funding for Montgomery County or any of the other regions. So that's sort of where we're at.
So maybe I have an outdated application then, because the one that I had a few minutes to look over says that the board would be set up by each of the FGUs that are involved would nominate their members to be on the board, and that's how the board of directors would be set up. Now you're saying...
No, it is.
And
we nominated, Montgomery County put forward Carl as our, in December. The board's already sort of made up.
When was that done?
Wouldn't there have to be a resolution on our end?
So this, I'm not sure anything about how this process happens, so that's that's something I would be interested to know more
yeah,
about.
Like I said, I've been working with Matt, and I don't know, I was kind of under the impression he was going back and reporting on things, and I don't know,
Because it seems to me that the county couldn't force someone to be on the board until we've formally decided to join the land bank, which we haven't done yet. And also your application references intermunicipal agreements, which have not been entered into either. So it seems like there's a lot, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong application.
But the way the application, if you look at the application, and in conversations with Steve Wallach, who's at ESD, he said that they just need drafts. They're not to be IGAs that are, because the problem is ESD wants to look at the IGAs before they're voted on, before they're, so we send them initial drafts, then we work over the next 90 days with that ESD to get them to the point. We have to submit them back to them before we can vote on them so that their lawyers can approve. That, that's been the understanding that we've had. That nothing that is submitted is to be, is final.
Legislator Kelly has been waiting patiently for the last 10 minutes.
What happens if none of the other counties sign on if we are just take the lead on this? What happens then?
No one else has to sign. It's just one FGU. We only need one. You're not signing up for the land bank. What you're doing is you're signing up to say, we are interested in moving through this process whereby the land bank would be established. This is just expressing, essentially, as ESD said, this is essentially telling them that you want to set up a land bank, then they give you up to 90 days afterwards to go through the meetings, establish the charter, and form a corporation, a 501c3, that would be the actual land bank.
Legislator.
Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
Sorry, did I?
Oh, I'm sorry. Martin, please.
Yeah.
Finish.
So if we're taking the lead on this and nobody else is getting off the pot and raising their hand and saying, I want in on this, what happens if, okay, we sign on, we say, yep, we're gonna do this. We're the ones saying we want to move forward and apply for this pot of money, and then Oneida County joins in on the land bank and stuff. We're the ones who took the initiative. Like,
That's not the case. Otsego County, Herkimer County, Schoharie County, all these other counties have come forward, they voted, they passed a resolution
in
to say,
support of the idea of a land bank,
Yes.
like we did.
but that's the process. First, establishing that if people are interested, then filing an application to ask for, or essentially asking ESD for one of those remaining slots. At which point, then they essentially grant us permission to get together and work on forming the actual land bank. All we're doing now is expressing interest. ESD does not grant creation of a land bank. All they do is they allow us one of those spots, and then the Department of State and the AG's office, they're the ones that control the funding and whether or not you can form. So this is purely a sandboxing stage.
Right. Okay. And you're using Mohawk Valley Collective as the little model to prove that we can move forward with?
No, there's 11 land banks in New York State currently.
I understand
Oh, yeah.
that. Because I assume with setting up the board of directors, which I believe you said that there are people already chosen or possibly chosen to be on the board of directors?
Well, when we went to each county, we asked each county to put forward someone essentially as a placeholder for that board for the initial meetings, and then because what happened, we started this process 2 years ago.
Right.
Some of the people involved aren't even in the process anymore. So once we get the permission from ESD to apply, then our plan is to go back to each one of the counties and draw on them to bring together their representative, work on the IGA in that 90-day period.
So in moving forward down the road, if we get the land bank and awarded the land bank, I would assume you or somebody with MVC would be important somehow on the board.
The model we've looked at is with that Buffalo Niagara land bank, where it's a distributed model, where you work with municipalities, you work with local nonprofits like Habitat in Gloversville, there's Gloversville Housing Improvement Corporation, groups like that to designate. Essentially, we have to go to the state and say, these are our 20 projects that we want to do, and what some of them do. Syracuse essentially put things out for bid. They said these are our top 10 projects, and then you do RFAs and RFPs, and so each land bank, that's part of what you figure out in that 90-day period. They all have a different mechanism.
And Mohawk Valley Collective is a mini version of a land bank?
Essentially, yes.
So with that being said, when do you envision like getting a return on these properties that you're working on? Are the skids moving forward?
Oh, absolutely. We have an apartment building, a 3-unit apartment building that we've been working on since November. We expect to have, we already have 1 unit rented. We expect to have the other 2 units rented in the next month or two. We've been having concerts at Unity Hall, which is our original building, for 2 years. We have a full summer schedule. We do rental events and things like that. So we're
a funding mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Later to Chester.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we don't miss this opportunity. I think a good case can be made that we're going to be reliant on some of these state programs to solve some of these problems that have been intractable over the years. And I would like to look at this a little bit differently, try to find a way to work through this so that we can achieve the goal of this regional land bank. I think you can make a case that the state's not sending enough help, that the opportunities are not big enough. And I certainly don't want to miss this opportunity. So maybe our way of thinking has to be with how we can just accommodate this first step, and then we can untangle some of these other things later. especially if this first step really does not obligate us in some of the ways that we could imagine if we spent a little more time.
I don't think that there's any action, though, that we can take tonight that's going to satisfy what is required.
I'm not sure I understand it, because they're looking for a signatory.
Which would be Matt, because we're not.
But that's not us. That's not us to, and there's a question of whether he signs it with our authority or he signs it because it's just like a grant that is available. So I don't know what action we can take here tonight to make that happen. Now, what we're talking about is a signature. That's what we're talking about.
Right, well, the thing is that certainly the legislature could they could endorse the signature and application. They could support it through legislation.
We could do that at the monthly meeting, but I don't know that we can do that here at a committee meeting.
And he's got some.
And it's got to be done by the 16th.
He's working under some timeframes, and so what do we need for a special meeting? Would that work? How many?
You need for 10 days? How many days do you need for a
Call
special?
special meeting, 48 hours.
Maybe we can work towards that.
I think
I'm hesitant myself, as a legislator, I'm hesitant to, I feel like I'm being pushed in. I know you're not, that's not your intention, but I've seen in the past where government agencies have jumped in, and MOSA was a perfect example, and this having, instead of 3 counties, having 6 counties scares me. And so I would rather give it some thought.
Well, of course.
And do that, and I'm going to rely on our council, but I think the question here is the ability to sign, and whether we need a special meeting to do that or to...
I just want to add to what you're saying, okay? Because I appreciate, and we do need to look into all of these things, and I'm not sure it would take that long. We could cover this pretty quickly to get some of these questions answered. But it's been my experience too, also that sometimes these opportunities come up in a way, and I guess my problem is I've been on that side of the rail, trying to get a legislative body to understand that a little bit of action on their part would be a great benefit. And I think these gentlemen are honest brokers here, so I just wanted to be able to address that. And if that took a special meeting, I'd be willing to do that, to participate.
Brian?
Just as far as the signature is concerned, I guess we legislate and we set policy. And, albeit it was a year and a half ago that we passed a resolution endorsing the idea, but I guess the way I look at this and the way I look at this signature is we in November 2014 as a legislature, all 9 saying yes, said we like this idea, it seems like it would work well for Montgomery County, we like the 6-county idea, endorsed the idea of it. This is the policy of this legislature at that time, given. But then after we set that policy, it's the job of the executive to execute that policy and see it through. Now, obviously, sometimes those need to come back to us for approval. And I think ultimately, it would, with this land bank, come back to us for approval in some form. But I think in my point of view, we've executed the policy saying this is what we want to do. I think it's now the duty of the executive to move forward with getting that to a point where it comes back to us as a legislature to say, yes, we like what you did, and I think that really is under the administrative part of the executive's duties of executing this policy.
I may be heard on that one. Resolution 227 of 2014 does not authorize the county executive to enter into any agreements, and even for grant applications, it comes before the legislature for approval, specific approval to sign. So supporting a concept is getting behind the idea, and we've seen this on with FMCC and other similar situations, supporting a concept and authorizing the executive to enter into a contract has, at least historically by this board, been viewed as two different things.
I just, I don't think it's an agreement, it's an application, and
Creating the land bank.
No,
It's signing on as the FGU, authorizing the formation of a land bank. I mean, that's a pretty big step.
the last
It's
2
not.
years, we as a legislature have never approved grant applications. We
That's
approve
not true.
contracts after the fact.
It's not true.
I mean, if you would, let me add, I mean, by all means, I want Megan to, pour over it, take a look at it, and if there is the possibility of a special meeting or whatever needs, what we're looking at is, how best to move this forward. I don't want anybody to rush into something. I don't want to create something that we all regret later. I understand the MOSA analogy very well. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to miss the opportunity. So if we could all, maybe agree that we're going to look at the information. Megan, I can get you anything you need as far as the resolutions. And again, they're all drafts. If there's anything else
Do you have resolutions from any other county authorizing their executive to enter into any kind of intermunicipal agreement?
No, because of the timing, and like I said, this was foisted upon us last Tuesday. And they had said, we're not in a rush, and we're working through, getting the counties, getting everybody on board and support. And then they're like, we have a deadline, we gotta, it came down from the governor, we have to have it done by the 10th, and that's when we pushed to get it back. Obviously, we asked for the end of the month so we could get the regular meeting.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't, they only gave us to the 16th. So I understand where you're coming from. Absolutely.
If anybody else wishes to be heard?
Okay, your idea then, as far as the 6 county and in reference to, or in comparison to a 1 county, is the amount of money we would get?
Yes. Yeah, because what we've been doing, and I didn't have time to put it into the table, but the money pretty much follows, the population, base. And right now, there's 17 million available. It's divided up between, I don't have the county list, but, we would, still be in the top 2 or 3, by size, and we would be the largest in the current round of funding. So while they're saying that a minimum of 1 to 2, I think an application for 3 to 4 million would be more in line with the size of the, based on their previous award.
But as far as Montgomery County goes, it would probably be based on population also, the disbursement of those funds that come into the 6 counties, would it not?
We are pushing to have a breakdown based on projects that are ready to go and also by equal division of funds. Because, one of the things that we've pressed with, the city of Utica, city of Rome, and Oneida, which they have been receptive to, is the population is not the only factor. These, the economic innovation study shows that we have been lagging behind because of the disinvestment. And in all honesty, the cities aren't interested in the land bank. They have urban renewal, they have, well-staffed planning departments. Their interest is some of the powers, extinguishing certain liens, brownfield funding. There's a lot of brownfield funding that's available through the land bank process. They're really interested in the tools. That has been, their point of view throughout the process.
Anybody else wish to be heard?
One of the major differences, if I may, between this concept and MOSA, we're all very familiar with MOSA, is that this is a tool that should Montgomery County choose to implement the tool in their jurisdiction, they may choose to do so. 20, 30 years could go by without you ever really wanting to use or, invite the land bank to help take care of a particular property. You are not obligated to, to use it. It's just a tool. This is the opportune time to allow, yourself a foot in the door, so to speak, so that should you down the line choose to use the land bank, you, at this point, said that you would like to have that tool available, but it's not sort of an outside agency dictating that, you know, you were a part of this, you need to use it, and sort of top down. It's really bottom up. It's you come to the land bank should you have a property or a project that you think makes sense, and then you choose to implement the land bank's assistance. And what the land bank can provide is access to capital that the county or the landowner may not necessarily already have access to. But it's something that, just to reiterate, is different than MOSA, where, you know, time can go by at your discretion. You never even have to use the land bank. It's just we want to make it as inclusive as possible throughout the 6-county region, so that should you choose to use it sometime in the future, you can.
That's not been my experience with it. The experience has been in your application, you have to identify specific projects that you want to do. And in the first round of applications with the Capital District Land Reutilization Corporation, first round, all we received was $175,000 for admin because our application was poor. And they sent it back the next time. And then you had to delineate what your projects were, and then they decided what Schenectady was going to get because of their projects and what Amsterdam was going to get because of their projects.
I mean, we definitely feel we need to designate projects and have a list. I mean, the county, I'm saying, but I think what Sean is saying is that if Montgomery County becomes a part of this and, you know, it becomes a, you know, an entity, you know, there's nobody saying you have to do these projects, you have to take this money. I mean, it's, you know, like, for example, I don't know if you know Vince DeSantis in Gloversville. His Gloversville Neighborhood Investment Corp. You know, they have 15 projects lined up. They have a full, you know, plan in place for different areas of the city. And, you know, it's that type of thing that's kind of shovel-ready, where I think that, you know, if we could do the same types of things in Montgomery County, I think that's where the potential lies. You know, being able to designate places like the Wagner House or other properties, you know, that are problems that need to be funded. You know.
All right. Thank you both for coming. Appreciate your comments. Appreciate everybody's comments. And we'll decide what way to move forward.
Thank you. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for your time, and apologies again for being remiss and, you know, keeping everyone in the loop.
Thank you both.
Yep.
We have a motion to adjourn the...
So moved.
Motion. Everybody in favor?
Aye.